Scope cones. All the tests for scope cones are failing. Follow the restrictions for each function and fix the code so every test passes. Okay, so it's very similar to the previous one. For all functions, you may not edit the line initially, declaring each test message. Okay, so we can't, there are certain restrictions. And we also can't edit any code on the same line as the return keyword. Okay, so we can't change anything on the return. It may be helpful to look at the values passed into these functions. Yes. So we'll look at that. Okay. So test one. What is happening? Right? What's happening? So let's go and look at the test. This is test one. I'm just gonna take this. I'm gonna move it up here. And what's going on here? So we have this function, right? We have this function, and this returns test one message. Okay, this function returns test one message. Well, what is test one message? Test failing. And do we have access to this thing? Do we get access? Yes, through the rules of scope. Test failing. So we return test failing. So what does that mean? That means this function test one, when I invoke it, when I run this function, I return test one message. So I return test failing to return value. So return value is test failing. And so we want the return value test failing to equal test succeeding, right? So since they're not the same, our test is failing, right? This is not working. And so what do we want? We want return value to be test succeeding. So we want this function to return test succeeding, right? And what does it say? Do not declare any new variable with the let keyword. Okay, we can't declare new variable. And what do you notice? What do you notice is kind of like a difference between this and this?
No argument?
Yes. So someone is turning on the blender and putting fruit in it, right? But this blender actually doesn't take any fruit. Okay, it's not built for that. It's really small. So that's a problem, right? This thing, test succeeding, the thing that we need is kind of being lost. And so we need to expect this. We need to be ready to capture this as an argument. Okay? So let's put an argument here. Specifically, what should we name this argument? Yeah. Excellent. We should name it test one message. Why is that? Because now this is going to come in here, and it's going to be test succeeding, right? And then we're going to return test one message. Well, is test one message going to choose this one or this one? The first one, right? As soon as it finds something, it's done. And well, what did it find? It found test succeeding. Does that make sense? Great.
I'm sorry. Where did it see test succeeding?
So here, they are executing the function. They're calling your function with an argument. This is down in the tests, so I brought it up. And so this test succeeding, imagine this is like a fruit. This is being given to you into your function. So now your function is ready to accept it, right? And you have to give it some sort of alias, right? You have to call it something, okay? And now test one message is test succeeding. And this test one message is going to be associated with this argument, not this one, because of the rules of scope.
So really, the test in this case is the expect return value to equal test succeeding.
Yes.
So why did they bury the let return value part of the code down with the test?
Because that is the test, right? The test is what the test does is your function written correctly, right? What you're doing is you are building a blender, okay? But you're never turning it on. You're building it the right way, and then you're gonna give it to someone else, the people who test this thing. And what are they gonna do? They're gonna turn it on and make sure that if they feed it the right data, that the right thing is returned. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. If you are the tester, right, you're gonna be feeding stuff. Like let's say you just bought a blender, you're gonna be putting random stuff into it, and you're gonna be expecting something. I expect a smoothie to come out of this, and if it doesn't, then the test failed, right? Yes.
The way you did it is obviously shorter, but if you said test one and then you just wrote like argument, for example.
Yes.
Argument equals test one message. Is that like clearer, like less confusing though, or is it just a good word?
It's I would say it's like equally good, right? So that's a good point. I can just call this like arg, or like something, or whatever you want. Okay, the actual word doesn't matter. Let's call it arg, right? And you can say test one message is now arg. So what is this doing? Test succeeding is passed into here. Now arg is test succeeding. We take test succeeding and we assign it to test one message. Well, what is test one message? It used to be test failing. And now we're reassigning it. Now it's going to be whatever arg is. And what was arg? Test succeeding. So now this is test succeeding. Okay, and then we return test one message. And so where is test one message? It's right here. And that's holding on to test succeeding. This is definitely another way to do it. Cool. Okay. Let's look at the second one. I'm going to bring it up here. Test 2. Where's it? Okay. Okay. So test 2 restrictions is do not change any code. Do not change any code in the body of test 2. You can edit the helper func though. Okay. So we have two functions. We have test2 and we have helper func. Okay? We're not allowed to change anything in here, but we can change something in here. Okay? What's happening? Okay, well, what are they expecting? So they call test2 with nothing, right? So which one of these are they calling? It's this one, right? Test2. So we execute test2, we run it. So what does that do? That executes helper function. So this initial function call calls another function. Okay, so what does this do? Helper func executes here. And helper func takes takes an argument. Well, what is the argument that's being passed in? Nothing, it's undefined, right? Okay, that's undefined. And we're going to say, okay, A is now test succeeding. A is test succeeding. Okay, so the fact that this was given undefined, that actually doesn't matter because we just overrode it with something else. Now A is test succeeding, and then we're going to return A. So we return test succeeding back out. We return it back out. And who are we returning it to? We're returning it out here. So helper func returns A, which is test succeeding. So this right here is test succeeding. Great. And then here, what are we doing? We're returning test2 message. Well, what is test2 message? Is it in this function anywhere? No, but it's here. So it's test failing. And then we return test failing. Okay, so that's what this returns. So that means that's what this returns. Test2, when we call it, returns test failing to here, right? And now test failing is obviously not test succeeding. Okay, so we just went over why this isn't working so far, right? Before we go into like how to fix this, does everyone understand like why this is not working? Yes.
Are you allowed to change the message, the initial test2 message here?
No. Good question.
Not.
You can't do that. And what does it say? Do not change any code in the body of test2, but you can edit the helper function. Okay. Yes. Sorry? Yep.
I'm just confused why. Okay, so if helper function is being called within the test2 function, but helper function exists below test2 function.
Oh, like how is it callable?
How is it called?
Great question. I wanted to touch on this yesterday and I totally forgot. So this is the only case where you can have access to something before you define it. And that case is when you define a function like this, using the function syntax, the function keyword syntax. So if I use function, right, say hi, and I console log hi, right, I can actually call this function, right, before I've defined it. And this is the only case where this happens, when a function is defined specifically like this, and this is called hoisting. This is called function hoisting. Okay. Only happens in this case. For example, where does this not happen? If I do this, if I say by, and I define a function using the arrow, right? Say by equals this, and this console logs by. Okay. This says say by is not defined. I can't do this because everything underneath me is visible and I can only look up here, right? So to line 12, say by doesn't exist as a function, right? But if I define a function like this, right, this thing, prior to execution, gets hoisted all the way to the top of the file, like at like line 0, right? And so now you can call it. Really good question. And this is one of the key differences between defining a function like this and like this. Yeah.
It seems like hoisting would be more useful to have it available using the function keyword.
Mm-hmm.
So why did they move to that arrow?
Oh, I see. So, good question. The fat arrow has some other what do you call it? Has some other functionality, for the lack of a better word, built into it, including changing the context of this, which is what we're going to talk about later. But JavaScript has like basically like every function and like every like thing inside of JavaScript, every element has like some context, and that context we call this, which is really confusing. It's a terrible word. But this fat arrow affects this a little differently than this. And also like in general, even if you define a function like this where it's hoistable, right? It's still best practice to call it after you define it. It's just generally best practice. Because by the time you call it, you should have seen it. Like the developer should have seen it. If this is a big file and you see a bunch of function calls happening, right, you're gonna have to then scroll and try to find where that's been defined. So it's generally good practice to just anything you use, just define it beforehand. Cool. Okay. So this function is able to call helper func, even though it's defined here because of hoisting. Okay. Now this is failing, right? This is returning test2 message, and test2 message has failed. So we're returning test failing. How can we make sure that? Okay. Any ideas on how to solve this? Yes.
Well, I know it's bad practice, but can you reassign test2 message within the helper function?
Yes.
Even though that's not good practice.
It's not good practice, but this is a workshop.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to talk about good practice or bad practice, especially with the later problems. It's just you're gonna see so much bad practice happening, and a lot of like just like useless stuff, like the sniper stuff. There was a lot of lines that just did nothing, right? It's not something that you should try to follow. But yes, if I then take this and reassign, so if when I run helper func, and this helper func executes here, and I find test2 message, which is up here, and I reassign it to test succeeding. Now this is going to be test succeeding, right? Now a test2 message is test succeeding. Okay, this reassign this. Okay, great. We return A. We return A here. Okay, that actually doesn't do anything. Returning A here does nothing. All we care about is what is this function test2? What does this return? And this returns test2 message. And what is test2 message by this point? It's test succeeding. Yeah, we are reassigning a global variable. Sweet. Does that make sense? Any questions? Yes.
function? Like, what if the test happened in between those two functions?
Okay, so what if you did this, like this? So it should still be fine, right? Because the fact that this was defined using this syntax means it's actually defined all the way up here, right?
Even though that's after the test two function.
Exactly. So what this is going to do is it's going to take helper function and it's going to execute it. It's going to do the reassignment and then return. And then this hold the value. Good question. Any other questions? Now is your time. Okay. Cool. All right. We'll continue here. Test 3. Okay. I'm gonna go down here. Test 2, test 3 is here. And what is happening here? So the way the test is working is they are executing test 3 with true. Okay, so just remember that. When we run test 3, or when they run test 3, they're going to give you true. And you should be expecting true as an argument, okay? Okay. So let's go up here. What does this say? This says, test 3 restrictions. Type only a single character in either test 3 or get message. Type only a single character in either test 3, which is this, right? So this whole function, or get message, which is this function. It's a couple functions. You can only write one thing, okay? Well, what is happening here? Well, we have test 3 message up here, and that's test failing. What is this function doing? Remember, we're calling this function with true, right? They're passing us true when we call test 3. So when we call test 3, we're given true. What does that mean? That means test 3 message is true. This is literally true, okay? If test 3 message, what is test 3 message? It's true. It's true. And it's not this right here, right? This has a decision to make. Is it going to choose this one or this one? It's going to choose this one, right? Because it's closest. So it's true. Great. And then what does it do? It reassigns test 3 message to test succeeding. It reassigns test 3 message. This is a little weird. But do you think this is reassigning this one or this one? It's reassigning this one. Because this is actually a variable, right? So we're taking that, and now test 3 message is holding on to test succeeding. So a couple of things happen here, right? Okay, let's keep going. Let message equals get message. So whenever you see something like this, just say, okay, whatever I'm going to give message, whatever I'm going to assign message, is the return value of this function, right? Whatever this function ends up returning, I'm going to take that value and I'm going to give it to message. Okay, so let's see what does this function return. What does it return? Well, that function is down here, right? And this function expects a variable called value. Okay, well, what is value? What is this? Well, when we call it with nothing, right? What is value? Undefined. Great. Okay, if undefined. If undefined. So is undefined truthy or falsy? Okay, so we don't do this. So we don't go into the if statement because it's like it's falsy, right? So we don't do that. Okay, and then what are we returning? We're returning test failing. Who is this? Which I don't know if you can see the line numbers, but which line is this function returning test failing to? Which line? Which variable? Message. Right? Whatever this returns, it's going to go here and it's going to be assigned to message. So message is test failing. Okay? And then we return test failing. What does this return to? It's test 3. Oops, sorry. Test 3 returns test failing. And so down here, test 3 returns test failing to return value. Return value is test failing, and that's not test succeeding. That's why this is failing. So far we've only seen why this is failing. Okay? So now let's try to get it to pass. And our restriction is type only a single character. Okay? We can only type a single character. And something you should notice is, remember this was falsy, right? Remember value was falsy. Let's imagine value was truthy. Let's say this is true, if true, right? We return test3 message, right? What is test3 message? Test succeeding. Exactly. So, if this is truthy, what this function is going to return is test succeeding. So get message is going to return test succeeding. Okay, before we hit this, it's going to immediately return test succeeding, which means this is going to return test succeeding, which means message is going to be test succeeding, which means we return test succeeding at the end. So we really want this if statement to trigger. We need to get this to trigger. The problem is this value is falsy. How do we get, with just one character, how do we pass on a truthy value here? Bang operator is not a value, right? It's just something that flips the value of something. What is a one character long truthy value? 1. Or 2, or 3, as long as it's not 0, right? Okay, well why does 1 work? Okay, get message 1. Now value is 1, right? Not undefined, value is 1. If 1, is that truthy or falsy? Truthy, great. Now we get to go in here, we return test3 message, which we know is holding on to test succeeding. And now everything else is test succeeding. So you can do 1, you can do 5, right? 5. Whatever you want.
I put the letter A, but that didn't work.
You put the letter A in here? Oh, like this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so A without quotes is going to look for a variable that you define called A. Right?
But I thought this is defining.
No, so if you want to define a variable, you have to use let or const. And the name of the thing you want to define, and then you have to assign it something. That's the only way you can define a variable. You can't just say A.
So like value is not yet a variable?
So value, oh, good question. Value actually is a variable because it's defined as an argument that a function is expected. So this is shorthand for really doing something like this. But this is the only exception.
But, because the above one's not a function, it's just a...
Yeah, yes, this is a function definition, and this is where we're calling a function.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
I know it's so confusing. It's so confusing.
The hoist situation.
Yes.
Calling it before you...
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on this one? String A would work, right? Because it's truthy, yes. But it's not a single character, right? It's 3 characters, unfortunately. Cool. Cool. Yeah.
So I put him around and I don't know why.
Yeah.
I wasn't the solution I was trying to figure it out, and I put the then operator in it if value, so I put if not value.
Yeah.
Return pass, but I don't know why.
That is amazing. Is that what you meant to do?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. I thought you were gonna. I thought you tried to do this.
No.
Oh.
Because it says like a single.
Yeah.
I forget the phrasing of it, but.
You're completely right. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
You're completely right. Oh my god. Yeah. No. This is
Oh my goodness, what was I doing?
Holy crap. No. This is right. This is. I guess that's why it said that you can put one character in either here or here, right? Really good point. So if you put nothing in here, that is undefined. Okay. So undefined is truthy or falsy? It's falsy. Well, what's the opposite of falsy? Truthy. So now it's if true, and we go in here. Really good point. So 2 ways to solve this problem is put a bang operator right here, or put a character right here. You can't do both though. If you do both, it's going to fail, right? Because why? This is truthy. So 5 goes in here. 5 is truthy. What's the opposite of truthy? It's false. So we don't go in here. So you have to choose. Really weird stuff, right? Very enlightening. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other questions here? Okay. We're close. This has been a trial. Let's see. Test 4. What is test 4 being called with? Okay, test 4, they're going to give us test failing. Okay, that's what we get. Okay? And we're going to live with that. Test 4 is giving us test failing. Okay. So what is that? Oops. What does that mean? That means here, test 4 is being passed test failing as an argument. Okay? And what does it say? Delete only a single character from any function. Okay, so we have that's all we have, right? Test 4 message is test succeeding. Okay, great. Test 4 is invoked by the test, right? With test failing. So now message is test failing. Does that make sense? Okay. It should at least make sense that message is test failing, right? Because that's what's literally being given to us. Okay. Now there's this other function, okay? And a bunch of stuff happens inside of it. I don't really care about that right now, right? Because a function never is invoked until you invoke it. Oh my god. A function doesn't actually matter until you call it, right? So let's not look at that, okay? Oh, it's being invoked right here. Okay, so this function is being run. So this function up here is being called with what value? Test 4 message. Well, what is test 4 message? We can't look in this function, right? Because of scope. We're not allowed to look inside. But we can look out here. And what is it? Test succeeding. So, okay, so we are calling inner func with test succeeding. So that means inner func, the message in inner func is going to be test succeeding. Okay? Okay, so now we're in here. And this, oh my god, what is that? That's horrible. Message, right? What is message? Is message this one or this one? It's the first one. Okay, so now that's holding on to test succeeding, okay? That is going to be assigned to message. Is this message this one or this one? It's the first one. It's this one. So we're taking message, which holds on test succeeding, and we're reassigning it with test succeeding. This line does absolutely nothing. It does nothing whatsoever. It's like I take the number 5 and I say, okay, now it's holding on to 5. Because this is referring to this and this is referring to this, right? You might want to think like, oh, because I already used up this one, I'm gonna use this one now. No, it's always gonna be this one, okay? So this is like a totally like redundant line. It doesn't do anything. It's just there to confuse you, right? Double inner. Okay, I'm not gonna worry about that because I haven't called the function yet. Let's not even look at that, okay? Now here, what are we doing? We are reassigning. We're reassigning test 4 message, right? Which is up here. We're reassigning it to be double inner with test failing passed into it, okay? Okay, well, what is double inner with test failing passed into it? That's when we get to go in here. So let's go in here. And what is message? It's test failing, right? Because that's what's being passed in, okay? So test failing comes in here as message. And so we take test failing and we assign it to test 4 message. So we take test failing and we assign it to test 4 message. Well, what is test 4 message? It was up here as test succeeding. Well, that's too bad. As of this line, it's going to be test failing. Okay? And then we're going to return test 4 message. We're going to return it. What is test 4 message? Test 4 message is up here, and it's test failing, right? So we return it. Well, what does it mean that we return this? That means double inner, when I call it with test failing, is going to return test failing. That means this whole thing is going to return test failing. Okay? So now test 4 message, which is what? Which is all the way up here, is test failing. We're assigning this thing to test failing. Okay? So we just walked through this whole thing, right? Now we're here. We're saying message. Message is test 4 message. What is... I mean, actually, this doesn't even matter, right? We're reassigning message. But this is just here to throw you off. But let's say it's assigning test failing. It's here to throw you off because why? the last line just returns test4 message. So this reassignment doesn't mean anything. We just care about what test4 message is. And what is test4 message? Test failing, right? Because we reassigned it. Okay. So this is why the test is failing, okay? This is why the test is failing. And so now let's try to diagnose where things went wrong, okay? Where did things go wrong? Well, this function wants to return test4 message. So what does that mean? That means we need test4 message to be test succeeding, right? Right now it's not, but we need this thing to be test succeeding somehow, okay? Well, we know that it actually always used to be test succeeding, right? Test4 message used to be test succeeding. It's just that at some point we overwrote it. So this was the issue, the overriding of it, the reassigning of test4 message. Where did that happen? Right here. This is where we took test4 message and we're like, okay, now this is going to be message. And message is test failing. And so we're going to take this and we're going to put it here. This is the problem. Okay? So if this never happened, right? If this never happened, we should be fine. Okay, right? So that's the problem. But we can't just comment it out, unfortunately. We have to delete a single character. And the answer is you're not gonna like it. The answer is not great. So why is this fail? Or like why is this bad? It's because we assign test failing to test4 message. So message is bad. Why is message bad? Because message is right here. And that's being passed in as test failing right here. Double inner test failing comes in here as message. Now message test failing, and then we do this. Well, message, right, happens to use this one because it's right here. But what if this message could access this one? What if we could somehow skip over this and go here? This used to be test succeeding, right? So that's good. If we could somehow access this. So how can we ignore this and go here? By taking away one character. Exactly. It's pretty frustrating, right? So, okay, why does this work? Because message is going to be assigned to test4 message. Well, what is message? MSG. It's not here, so let's expand our scope, right? And it's right here, and it is test succeeding. Boom. So we take test succeeding, and we assign a test4 message, and now test4 message is test succeeding. It's always been test succeeding, but it's test succeeding again. And to be clear, you don't have to take out the G, right? The whole point is you have to make these like not match, right? They just can't be the same thing. So you could take out the S, or you could take out the M. It doesn't matter. As long as this MSG, these three characters don't match up here, right? It's gonna keep looking until it finds the next one. Any questions? Except for like, why would you do this? Why would you do this to us? Right? Like this does nothing. Cool. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that in the real world, this, I don't know, I call it like overlapping functions, like
Yeah.
that it would be unrealistic that it would be the
So something like this is definitely not gonna happen in the real world, right? And also something like this where you're like reassigning message to be something else and then you just return something else. Like this line makes no sense. A lot of things in here make no sense. But where what is really important to know is that like you can get really, really complicated functions that do really, really complicated stuff and share lots of shared information, right? And that can all be bundled into a function that has a bunch of functions in it. And so in that scenario, right, there will there will be issues where like certain variables are not holding on to the values that you expect it to, right? And to go ahead and debug that and try to get to the bottom of why that's happening, you should know how scope works, and just to see like how what the order of execution is, what each function is doing, right? And then once you find the issue, you can fix it, and then you can also like, as like extra credit, like write some comments as like, okay, this is causing us trouble. This is what it does, in case anyone else comes here and is looking for stuff. So really like, I think I'm allowed to say this. So again, at Coinbase, there was a case where there was a function that was supposed to return like true, but it returned false. Like it was one of those like classic, like really like one or the other errors, and because of that, like I think we lost like $2 million. And yeah, it was horrible, right? And so we have this one line that says like, okay, this boolean equals whatever, and then above it there's like 10 lines of comments of like, okay, this is what it does. And to figure out like the series of steps to see like how that ended up being assigned that thing is like requires like being able to read through stuff like this. Okay.